All right, good afternoon, everybody. It is 5:15 p.m. on Tuesday, May 9th, and you are at a Wausau Waterworks Commission and a Finance Committee meeting joint for this beginning part. I will note that we have a quorum of the Wausau Waterworks Commission present here.
And I will call the Finance Committee portion of this meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, May 9th, 2023. We also have a quorum present. The first joint item that we have for this evening is a presentation, informational only. Neither body will take any action tonight. This is really just a preliminary presentation. And then after this item, Finance will continue with its full agenda. So without further ado, I think we'll bring up Public Works Director Eric Lindman to introduce our presentation for tonight. And we'll go forward from there. Oh, yes, we'll take questions from the committee members, for sure. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Glad everybody could be here. We have community infrastructure partners here this evening to give a presentation in general on performance contracting. It's something the city hasn't done before in the past. It's a different way of doing business. And they're also going to walk through the project for lead service line replacement and how performance contracting can, be utilized in that type of environment on such a long duration project and potential of reducing the timeline as well. So we have Sean and Sean here with Community Infrastructure Partners. So welcome, guys. Thank you.
Thank you all for your time in hosting us. As I'm getting much, much older, this will challenge my ability to read this. But so, as Eric said, I'm Sean Karashke. I'm the president and CEO of Community Infrastructure Partners. Sean Agate, our CFO. I thought it would make sense to quickly explain how we got to Wausau, Wisconsin in the first place. I had the pleasure of meeting the mayor at the White House summit that Vice President Harris had in January. No explanation required why she was there as a staunch advocate for the city of Wausau. I was there because I think they had an extra seat. But with that, the reason why we were one of the, I think 2 or 3 private companies there is because what Sean and I do is we are purveyors of community-based public-private partnerships. And so I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with traditional P3s, public-private partnerships. What Sean and I do is we deliver the community-based public-private partnership. And as it comes to the lead service line replacement program, that's a tool that was developed by the EPA in 2013. And it's really a delivery model that focuses on how do you take huge investments in infrastructure and incorporate community-based benefits into that? And those community-based benefits are typically around workforce development, small minority-owned business participation, mentor-protege programs, all those things that take those types of sizable dollars that go into communities, and instead of just giving them to large national engineering firms, how do you turn those into economic development opportunities for the community? So Sean and I have been in that business for 7 or 8 years. We have done the only CBP3s, as they're called, in the entire country. There are 4 of them. One of them happens to be in Milwaukee. That one has been in operation for a little over 3 years. And so through our relationship with the city of Milwaukee, as I heard the mayor present at the White House panel that day, we connected with our Wisconsin people and said, man, it really seems like what Wausau is trying to do around their lead service line replacement program aligns very well with what the parameters of a CBP3 are. We connected at that point, and it does seem that there is very strong alignment in terms of what a CBP3 does and what the city is trying to accomplish here. So as we said, a CBP3 is a delivery model that the EPA created. Part of the reason that the benefits are able to be achieved through that is because the private sector firm does not self-perform any of the work. So as a result of that, you can bring in all of the target businesses that you want to participate in that. So local, small, any other types of groups that you want represented in that can be part of that delivery mechanism. And then all of those metrics and things that are important to the city are actually built into the contracting mechanism so that the compensation to the private party is actually tied to the achievement of those measures. As we said, this exists in 4 places throughout the country. It does not currently exist anywhere around lead service line replacements because the money has never been available to do programs of this size and scale before. So part of this for us, as well as the city of Wausau, is really the opportunity to be a leader on the national stage, to be the first to take on a program of this size and stature. So the federal lead service line program, as I'm sure most of you know, is $15 billion that is going to be structured over the next 5 years. As we know by the latest estimates, the state of Wisconsin is scheduled to get about $400 million of that. The process that the DNR has established is that it's going to be a competitive process through applications to compete. So Wausau is going to compete with Milwaukee, Racine, Madison, anywhere in the state that actually has lead service lines that wants funding. It's going to be a competitive process. They've come up with their criteria for how that money is going to be prioritized and distributed. But at a federal level, the funding is structured where 49% of that money is going to be principal forgiveness, 51% is going to be low interest loans. That $400 million for the state of Wisconsin is not enough money to get rid of all the lead service lines in the state. So as an example, Milwaukee has 66,000 lines alone. At an average cost that everyone is using of $10,000 a line, Milwaukee alone has a $660 million need. So it's very important that the cities outside of Milwaukee and Milwaukee maximize what they can get in that principal forgiveness, which is, as we call it, the free money. So what's happening on a national level at this point is that no one has really moved yet. And part of the reason nobody has moved is because there's a huge amount of uncertainty around how much money each local municipality or utility is going to get because of all the interdependencies. So as you can see in this last bullet, Wausau in the state of Wisconsin is no different. So these interdependencies really are driven by how much debt service or debt obligation is a particular city or municipality going to be on the hook for by the time this program has run its course in 5 years because of that non-principal forgiveness piece. So what that's driven by is how much money is going to be available, driven by that competitive process that we described. So one example, as we are working with Milwaukee on this, is in their 66,000 lines, their plan at this point, you may have seen, is to go, they've never done more than 1,000, they want to do 1,500. So that 1,500 by math is about $15 million. That $400 million, a third of it is theoretically slated to go to Milwaukee, so that would be about $135 million. If they're only asking for 15 that first year, that's really creating about $20 to $25 million that's going to be available for other communities in the state of Wisconsin. If they do that for 5 years, that's going to be about $75 million that's going to be available. But you don't know that. And you don't know what other cities and utilities are going to be asking for. So it's impossible to know ultimately how much principal forgiveness is going to be available to the city of Wausau or to other places. So what's happening in the country right now is cities and utilities don't really want to move forward and take that first step because they want to be able to answer the question of, well, how much money is going to be free and how much are we going to have to take on as debt? You're not going to know that until really the start of the 5th year when money has been already allocated and dispersed. So what we're going to talk about is what a reasonable first step for the city of Wausau might look like, understanding those constraints. So what we see is the opportunity for the city to replace all 8,000 lines through this program. Our understanding is that there is a desire for Wausau to be lead-free, and we think there is a means to do that through this program. As we talked about through the White House Summit, the Vice President was very clear that the only way this is going to get done is through partnerships with the private sector, and the way that this has been done historically is not the way that they want to see it done. So what they're basically saying is, just putting more money into this program to do it the way it's been historically done is not going to achieve the desired results that they want to see happen through this. So what we see as the opportunity really is for the city of Wausau to take advantage of what we call being the first mover. So by being the first mover, the EPA and the White House have been very clear that they want to put somebody on a pedestal to be the model for the rest of the country to follow what's called an alternative delivery method for getting this done, which is the CBP3. We believe through that, it really positions Wausau well, not only for additional funds and support from the DNR in Wisconsin, but from the EPA and the federal government, but also through philanthropic sources. So there are plenty of foundations that are participating in this program right now. Robert Wood Johnson, Kresge, Gates, numerous foundations that are looking to find communities like Wausau that are committed to being lead-free, that meet certain socioeconomic and demographic profiles to be able to provide additional grant support outside of what is the principal forgiveness through the BIL funding. So what we're going to talk about, and Sean will go into the details, is how do you structure a program that achieves the three main goals that we understand are important to Wausau. One is getting rid of all the lead service lines by the time the program runs its course, 2028, 2029. Minimize the debt burden on your ratepayers, understanding what's already in place through the PFAS issue that's happened here. So we're very aware and very sensitive to that, which is all the more reason why you need to maximize as much principal forgiveness as you can get above and beyond the 49-51 split. And then to incorporate the desired socioeconomic metrics that are important to the community of Wausau. So what we'll point out about that is, as we've worked across the country, what's important to Wausau in that third piece about socioeconomic drivers is not the same as Milwaukee. It's not the same as Prince George's County outside of Washington, D.C. It's not the same as Chester, Pennsylvania outside of Philadelphia. It's not the same as Seattle. It's not the same as Kansas City. It's going to be driven by this community and what's important to achieve if you're really going to look at what's ultimately about a $55 to $60 million investment in the city of Wausau. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sean.
Thank you. So as Sean mentioned, there's a lot of uncertainties around when the funding is coming in, how much funding Wausau would be awarded, what percentage of that will be grants or principal forgiveness versus very low interest rate loans, whether or not we can get philanthropic funding or elsewhere. So a proposal we would offer for Wausau to consider would be to contract with us to structure a comprehensive program to replace all of the lead service lines, but take it in a year-by-year basis, depending on how much funding comes in a given year. And this is something that we've done successfully elsewhere. I think a good example is Chester, Pennsylvania. It's a city of about 35,000 people where we ran a $50 million program. They had very limited revenue. They were in bankruptcy protection. So what we did was work with PennVest, which was the equivalent to DNR, it's the State Revolving Fund in Pennsylvania, and worked on quarterly applications. In Wisconsin, it'll be annual applications, and structured the financing in a way where we maximize principal forgiveness, get outside grants, and try to defer any low interest rate loans or debt service to the extent possible to minimize the impact to ratepayers. And that works well on an annual basis in Wisconsin. So the year one goal would be to ramp up to 500 lines. We understand Wausau's at about 100 lines a year. And that would be the smallest amount we do in a given year while we structure the program, build the team, try to raise outside funding, and do contractor development. So one of the challenges we see is going to be there's not enough local plumbers to do a large-scale program to replace 8,000 lines in a short period of time. So we can structure something like a residential plumber program, provide all the training and resources, so you get more and more interest, you get better and better pricing, and now you can do a lot more lines in a given year, and these can be local residents, they can be Wausau-based businesses, or at least regionally based businesses. So the way that would work is upon each funding deadline, we'd work with the city, we'd put a package together for Wisconsin DNR, work with them and try to get support from the EPA, from the White House, from other nonprofits and philanthropy. And then the city can make a decision on each year on moving forward based on how much money the city is awarded. So what that looks like here on a financial basis The total cost we estimate, and this is based on our understanding of the current inventory, there's about 8,000 lead service lines. 4,800 of that are full lines, public and private. The difference between that is just the private side alone. So that would be about $58 million if we're using $9,000 a line. Milwaukee's current cost is $9,600, so we think it's a decent estimate, but we think we could drive that cost down significantly as we scale up. And the one thing to note about these performance-based structures is every dollar saved below that gets recycled back into the program, so you're just replacing more and more money. It's not just additional compensation and profit for the private sector. What we've mapped out here is based on the rules that Wisconsin DNR has proposed for this $15 billion that they're getting, their allocation of that. We estimate that on the private side, if we don't get any outside funding and we're only relying on Wisconsin DNR, 75% of that money will be grants, 25% will be very low interest rate loans at 0.25% interest rate. And then on the public side, those are more likely to be loans based on how Wisconsin DNR is running the program, 1% loans amortized over a 20-year period. However, just year one, the way we look at that, if we first target the private side replacements that haven't been done, we estimate that that'll cost about $500,000, $562,000 to be exact. But the debt service, the annual payment, is less than $29,000 a year over a 20-year period. That's because we think we're getting 75% of that $562,000 in grants or principal forgiveness. So it's a very small portion that would be loans, and that would be amortized over a 20-year period. So again, the annual impact to that year one would be less than $29,000, and we view that as a worst case scenario because we think there's additional money beyond Wisconsin DNR to reduce that from, whether it's federal sources like the EPA, whether it's wind grants, whether it's philanthropic sources like Gates and Robert Wood Johnson and others that are part of the accelerator program. So finally, this is the schedule that we think we can do for an entire program. So as we mentioned, 500 would just be year one, and then we'd ramp up significantly to replace all 8,000 lines in a 5-year period. I think the initial estimate in one of the inventory reports was over a 15-year period, and that would probably cost $80 million. So by accelerating this, we can significantly reduce the cost, but we'd ramp up to 1,000 or to 1,500 replacements in year two. While we build that capacity, still trying to prioritize the private side, so we're delaying any debt service because that's more likely to be principal forgiveness. Then by year three, we're at full capacity. Year 3 and 4, we're doing over 2,000 lines a year, where we have annual cohorts, we're getting more and more plumbers, residential plumbers on board and capable and certified to replace these. And we think by the end of year 5, Wausau can be completely free of any lead pipes.
So we'll leave it open for questions, but I think my final sort of thought that I'll leave with you all is you're in a little bit of a damned if you do, damned if you don't spot, in that this window of time and money is going to be fleeting. So you can't get the free money if you don't also take on some of the money that you actually have to borrow. And so our message to communities across the country has been that it's a very small window of opportunity where if getting rid of lead is important to you, you're never going to see this influx of even the 49% free money again. So if you sit and wait and even delay in application for year one, that's money that you're leaving on the table. And again, we can use Milwaukee here, but it's the same of cities across the country. Chicago's having a huge problem with this right now. They have 400,000 lines. Is really that with each passing year, that's 1/5 of the available money that is going to potentially be unavailable. So time is of the essence, and speed and sort of first to this is going to be the recipient of a lot of support, both technical assistance, as the federal government is calling it, but also financial assistance from other means. So if this is something that is important to Wausau, if you wait 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years, unfortunately, you're going to be in a position where you're going to have to pay for all of it yourself, most likely, as opposed to at least getting 49% of it, if not more, by virtue of moving fast. So with that.
I have I have a quick question, and then we'll open it up too for the commissioners and for the committee members. But, I mean, all of this is largely speculative. Obviously, it's a large, very, very large roll of the dice. I mean, we all value the quality of the water, and we all know that lead service lines should be eradicated as soon as possible, and that process has been slow. Now, that said, we have struggled historically with getting enough qualified plumbers to do the work on time. We've purposely applied for less through available DNR sources because we just couldn't complete the work in time for that spend down. If the only incentive that we have to get to these goals is to just train and create more plumbers, what if people don't take advantage of that opportunity? If we can't train, equip, and qualify these plumbers in this time, people can want this service we can want to pay for it, people can want to do it, but if we cannot get that work done in time, and we can't spend down those grants in time, assuming they even come in, then what happens? I mean, even if we're taking this year by year, first, who's writing for the grants? Are you, as a partner, writing for the grants
Yes.
on our behalf? So meeting those deadlines is not going to be the responsibility of the staff.
Correct. It has to be submitted, obviously, by you, but we do the work to fill out all of the applications and deal with the DNR to get that done.
Okay, and I just cannot be emphatic enough when I say this effort cannot fall on the backs of the ratepayers. It just cannot. We are already, we're leveraged. We've built two new plants. We are looking at a huge rate increase, 65%. People are wildly angry about that. I mean, there's a lot of negative public sentiment about that. And, I think we also have to be willing to understand that if we commit to a plan like this and take it year by year, we also have to be willing and able to scale back and rescind that effort if that funding isn't coming, because we have reached the maximum for what residents can pay for. We just cannot let this fall to them if we don't get what we thought we were getting. So,
Your concerns are absolutely valid and well heard, and we are sensitive to all those, which is why we do think Wausau is a prototypical example for the rest of the country. No place is simple in terms of we have contractors waiting to do this work. We don't have sensitivities around our ratepayers. You are a prototype for what people need to understand as they take on programs of this nature. So as far as the contractor capacity is concerned, there's a couple things just quickly. So one is, as the mayor knows, there's a huge push for partnership with the labor unions on this. So we do have a national partnership with LIUNA, who is the laborers, and they have other trade association partnerships. That's going to be entirely driven by the particular community about how much they do or don't want to work with the labor unions. It's different everywhere you go, as you know. But that's a backfill, and they're committed to working almost like the traveling nurses program that you might be familiar with. They have tons of contractors who are willing to go to South Fork, South Dakota, if that's where there's work and wages that meets what they're interested in. So it can be customized around that. The other piece, too, is for what we talked about for volumes here, at least in year one, you're talking about 4, maybe 6 plumbers. It's not a huge amount to be able to get that work done even as we ramp up. So we don't see any concern, again, as the first mover piece of this, or even an early mover. It's when all of a sudden Milwaukee mobilizes and a lot of Minnesota mobile, everybody's going to be competing for the same pool. So what we've seen historically, we've never had contractor issues on any of our programs for a couple reasons. So one is contracting directly with the private entity versus with the public entity makes a huge difference. They're more comfortable contracting with the private sector because of delays and issues that they typically have, either sometimes going through the GCs or getting paid by the municipal government. We advance pay all our subs. We pay them typically net 15 days, and we'll carry that cost until we are remunerated by the public side. And the other piece is, and this is hugely important, is when the contractors know that there's a program, not just a project. When it's a project mentality, they're always worried about where their next project is going to come from. So they're always in business development mode or trying to find the next thing. If they know there's a program in Wausau, even if it's going year to year, but optimistically that it's going to be 5 years of this type of work and they don't need to hunt for other work during that time, it's really more of an opportunity to build and grow their businesses outside of the program more than anything else. So that's the economic development side of this. So those elements all come together, really provide a good environment for the small businesses to want to participate in this.
Well, and on the cost side, though, I mean, we all know what happens with the law of supply and demand. We already have weathered this with other types of infrastructure, where as things scale up, I mean, even things like road repair, things that you had a ton of bidders on before, you don't now. I mean, everybody is rife with work. They all have more than they can handle, and they'll price up jobs on purpose because they don't care if they get them or not. I mean, if we're in that situation and this is starting to scale up where there's not enough plumbers and there's plenty of work, our $10,000 per line estimate could be half of what we think it is. Are we going to expect to see cost increases just based on volume? I mean, is there any containment on the cost throughout this process?
Yeah, it's a performance-based structure. So our compensation is going to be tied based on a fixed price, fixed schedule, and then other customized metrics. So it could be a number of companies that were, graduating through a residential plumbing program or mentor protege program. Their socioeconomics, it could be a number of lead service lines replaced in a given year. So yeah, we're directly incentivized by that, or we won't get compensated. So we'll give you a guaranteed fixed price not to exceed of what we propose, $9,000 a line.
And there's no concern about bringing in a traveling workforce in terms of quality or accountability if the work isn't performed properly?
So we only get paid as those lines are then certified by a third party that the city or Eric or whoever is responsible for. We don't get to pick who that third party is.
Well, and so that is part of the concern, is a project of this scale, even beyond year one, could open up streets, roads, sidewalks, lawns, and neighborhoods citywide. What happens if that doesn't go well? I mean, there needs to be some measure of guarantee or accountability, both in the time that it takes to do the work, that the costs associated with the job get paid, and that the restoration is proper. I mean, we really could create a mess for ourselves if that's not properly managed. So what happens with that?
Yeah, there would be a third-party certifier that oversees all of the work, from any preliminary engineering to the construction to the landscaping and all, like the structural improvements in the public right-of-way, that would tie our compensation to that being correct. Otherwise, we wouldn't get paid.
Well,
We'd be on
and
the
the
hook.
problem could be bigger than just not paying you, though. I mean, you have to live with what if this isn't done properly, and now you have this problem? We can say we've not paid our partner, but the people that are living with the situation don't care about that. So, I mean, we have to have some certainty that we'll be able to move forward and be successful, the get in, get out, restore, replace, move on, that we not only have the labor force to do it, but that we have the quality to do it with,
Yeah.
versus a fly-by-night situation.
Yeah, I mean, we're insurance bonded the same way you would expect everybody else to be bonded in those instances. I think this is considered effectively a full risk transference model, the way that that's set up and how Sean described in terms of compensation and performance tied to results. There's always going to be scenarios, as you pointed out, where what if something, right? And so you're as protected as you could ever be in these types of contractual structures. I really don't know what.
Well, and that's good to know. I mean, that's comforting, because there are, there's situations that come up on underground work up here that I'm sure happen in other areas, but we have a preponderance of rock. I mean, people encounter things that drive up the cost and the ease of the work on a routine basis when they start to dive into things underground here. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
And we've dealt with that regularly. So the program in Milwaukee is a stormwater-based program. It's now done about $30 million of work. In terms of full risk transference, the way that is structured is the private partner pays for all of the stormwater improvements and doesn't get paid a dime until a third party, as Sean said, comes in and certifies that what was implemented met what was designed. So in that process, there's absolutely ledge and flooding and all sorts of things, pipes that get hit. Those risks are all taken by the third party. And so what happens in that, similar to this, is there's a predefined price of $2.36 a gallon. So whether it costs the private sector $1.75 a gallon or $9 a gallon, it doesn't matter to the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District. They're paying $2.36 a gallon. The only difference in what we talked about here is whether that price is $9,000 a line, $8,500 a line, whatever that price is. If there's a line that's done at $7,000 and the cost is $9,000, that $2,000 goes back into the pool. If it's $11,000, that's where that $2,000 is going. But the idea is to do the lines for as little as possible to get as many lines done with the limited funding that you're going to ultimately get.
Sure. Committee members or commissioners, any questions?
Commissioner Jean.
I just wanted to make sure you're well aware, but it seems like you've done a lot of homework on it. We typically can't be doing construction, pavement of roads 12 months out of the year. Are you well aware of that? My question, is this money that we expect to flow through the EPA to the state, is that affected by the debt ceiling or not? Do you know?
We're being told that it is not. I don't think anybody is changing any plans as far as the federal program at this point on the debt ceiling. If anything, it may create a delay, but that money theoretically has already been all appropriated at this point.
Mr. Robinson.
So this is a combination of doing work in the public side and the private side. As it relates to the take rate on the private side, what are the keys to the success there if you've got a recalcitrant owners that don't want it? Is it a mandatory ordinance, or how do you ensure at the end of the day we're successful in replacing all of those lines?
I think it's a couple things. So community outreach is huge in something like this, obviously. And so what we do in all the communities we work in, we're not local and we don't pretend to ever be local. So we align with whoever the most effective local community outreach organizations are. And in certain places, it could be 10, right? So where I am in Providence, Rhode Island, there's Liberian community outreach, there's Portuguese community outreach, there's all different nationalities and ethnicities that relate to almost street by street or neighborhood by neighborhood. So part of the way that this gets done is building confidence in the program. There are other issues, though, that exist here that have existed in other places, which is tenant versus owners, right? So Newark, as an example, passed an ordinance where it gave the tenants the ability to allow the work to get done in the home. We don't know that that has to be done here. We don't know that that's even being considered here. But I think it's part of why the plan is to start with just the 500, which is to find, I don't want to necessarily call it low-hanging fruit, but how to demonstrate success and build confidence in the entire community by getting those 500 done so that people are more comfortable that this is the right thing and is being done successfully and responsibly for all the stakeholders.
Other questions from the commission? Okay.
Finance Committee questions?
Did you?
Go ahead, Doug.
Thank you. I guess to piggyback on what Jean says here, we have, we've had some cases where we get the city side, or we get the homeowner installation, we run into winter, and we've just recently had some of those where we couldn't get back to do the city side till the spring. Now you're disrupting again. So I understand you would be acting as a general contractor, or is that the third-party quality control person? Because there's, the homeowner side, the city side, there's landscaping, there's trees. We have to coordinate with the city forester in the case of destroying or coming too close to a tree, concrete contractors, the seasonal things. So to put the homeowner in a position where he has to be a general contractor, it's a lot to ask. And if we can take that burden financially and management-wise, so is that
Yeah. So
what you're considering?
Think of this as turnkey soup to nuts in the life cycle of how you replace a lead service line, from planning, community outreach, all the way through post change-out testing. The one thing we don't, so we call it an ecosystem of delivery partners. So everybody that's involved in that life cycle to make that happen and have a successful change-out rolls up under us, and we are the single contracted entity and point of accountability to the city. So that way, traditionally, I keep pointing to Eric back there. So Eric doesn't have to worry about the 50 different firms or the 100 different firms. He has one firm to worry about, and that's us. The one piece that doesn't roll up under us for pure objectivity and accountability is that third-party certifier. So that's somebody that really however you want to structure that is accountable to you to ensure that you're getting exactly what you want with each change out.
One more question, if I could. So you've got the $9,000 fixed. There's different methods and different landscapings and different distances. We could be looking at some that are quite simple, and then we've got on the east side of town, it's rock intensive. So your boring, directional boring is not quite as, I mean, that's probably the low cost way to do it. When you get a cost savings, then you're saying that rolls back in, you still get a certain percentage as a profit, but the above and beyond comes back.
Fixed price on the fixed percentage of the total spend. So basically if you have 500, let alone 8,000, you're really just getting the benefit of the economies of scale at that point. So for every $25,000 replacement that has a tree removal, a sidewalk reconstruction, and whoever knows what else in that one, ideally you have 6 that are $3,500 because those are simple and straightforward. The house is close, straight in, straight out, fast and easy.
Did you have another question, Mr. Robinson? Oh, you'll save it for Mary?
Anyone else have questions from finance? If not, our presentation was just informational in nature. Take some time to mull this all over in your mind. I mean, in future sessions, we'll certainly dig a little more into the nuts and the bolts of the money part, I think, right?
Right,
So-
yeah, and if you have questions that you would like to find answers to, feel free to email me or Eric or both, and we will make sure we continue the discussion there. Thank you so much for this presentation.
Thank you for having us. Appreciate it.
With that, I guess I would look for a motion to adjourn our Wausau Waterworks Commission. I have a motion by Alder Herbst and a second by Commissioner Jean. All in favor can signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the Wausau Waterworks Commission is adjourned. Enjoy.
Thank you. We'll just pause for a second so we can shuffle around a little bit. Okay. And finance remains in session. We've got a full agenda tonight. So item number 2 on our agenda is the minutes of our previous meeting from April 25th, copies of which are in the packets. Does anyone have anything they need corrected on the minutes? If not, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes. Motion from Watson, is there a second? Second by Denny. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries. Item number 3 is discussion and possible action regarding ARPA funding requests and related budget modification. You'll notice that we had one to rank for tonight, which was the backup communications for the water tower on the west side. And so you have, well, Mary Ann is bringing around actually the scoring sheet for where we left off and the analysis of where we're at with ARPA funding in general. We'll let her get that passed out. It's okay, as long as the information gets out, we're good.
There's a technique to that.
Okay, so where we're at is this item did score highly. Obviously, backup communications to maintain a safe and available water supply is key. And so, I would say if we were to take an average, that we were probably in the mid-70s for a score here. And then as compared to the total ARPA allocations that are left, we have $1,810,629 left that we have not yet assigned. And this is $250,000 of that, if you would choose to fund it. How are you guys feeling about this? Sarah?
I guess I would make a motion to approve the ARPA fund request. I think it's a great opportunity to use these funds for, what they're intended for, which is helping our ratepayers and water.
Yep, safe and reliable water is a key part of that. So
Right.
Doug?
I could second that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to move this project forward for ARPA funding. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed. That item carries. Item number 4 is discussion and possible action on parking lot lease with JSAF Incorporated for 610 and 614 North First Street. You have some information in your packet on this, along with a recommendation to approve. This is the lease for the parking lots that adjoin the Dudley Tower, I believe, correct, on First? So anyone have questions at all on those leases? If not, is there a motion to approve that? Motion from Watson, second from Martins. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that item carries. Item number 5 is discussion and possible action on sole source request from DPW GIS for Pictometry International Corporation. You've got a sole source document in the packets that outlines the need. We had just done some aerial photography, but then after that initiative was completed, we have added or annexed a large swath of land that's not part of that. So that's where you've got the documentation in the packets. And we do have Dan from GIS here if you have questions on the project. Does anyone have any questions on the request? Go ahead, Sarah.
So the quality would be the same as what was performed in 2020? Hello.
Dan Kerntop, GIS analyst. So yes, the resolution would be the same, 3-inch color resolution. We would be getting one extra product out of this, would be some 3D mesh. So that would be most of the central part of the city for planning purposes. But the pictometry is an oblique imagery. It's unique. Assessment uses it, police uses it in their central square software. Inspections uses it. So it seems to be used around the departments pretty well.
And then it looks like there's like a better public framework for it, like the app or,
Yes,
city
so
residents can-
internally, we're given tools to measure, so like assessment can measure the height of buildings and things like that, square footage. Externally with the public, those tools are not available through this vendor, but they're still able to see things from an oblique angle.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? If not, is there a motion to approve the purchase? Motion from Watson, second from Martins. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. Item number 6 is discussion and possible action on budget modification for summer work camp. You'll see the information in the packet there. They're looking for approximately $20,000. This would really allow some small home improvement projects to get done by a work group that will be in the area during the summer months to help out homeowners that would need that type of assistance. Does anyone have questions on that at all? Sarah?
So we had already approved this previously, right? It was just, we sort of forgot about it in the budget? Or-
Correct.
Okay.
I think the problem was there was nobody, it was April of 2022 where it was presented because we had to get into their calendar. And then I think there was no one that took ownership to actually make sure that it was included in the budget.
And so this would come from the Economic Development Fund?
Yes, so this is proceeds when our original developer agreement with the mall contained a provision that if they ever refinanced their mortgage and took money out, that we received, believe it was 5% of the proceeds of anything they took out. And so we received that, and we ultimately shared that back with the mall to help with marketing, but we did retain a sizable sum, and that those funds have been sitting, so we would use that for lack of another funding source, basically.
And I think that's sort of cool, because then, I mean, that's, proceeds from the mall, which is downtown, that can benefit everyone across this city. So, cool.
Good. Okay. Any additional questions? Is there a motion then to modify the budget then to include the summer work camp as proposed? Motion from Watson, is there a second? Second from Lukens. Further discussion? Seeing none? Oh, Doug, go ahead.
Yes, sure, just the modification, so we do have funding to cover it through what you just
Correct.
described. It's not-
Right.
okay.
This just puts the
been
earmark
no
on it.
line item in the
Got it.
budget.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, no additional questions? But members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries as well. Item number 7 is discussion and possible action on federal building facilities loan and related budget modification. You see that we've got a request in from Metro Plains to work on some, looks like infrastructure that maybe has progressed a little quicker than what they expected. And so they're looking for some help with that. It looks like we've got a couple different funding options for that. One of which is TID, because the building is in a TID district that can afford to disperse that type of funding. And the other was from, what account did we have it from? And I just have to shift presentations here.
WR.
It was it was the other fund. So does anyone have questions on this at all or thoughts? Sarah?
I guess I would, although, I think it would be beneficial to use the TID funds just because it is in that district and then reserve those WRP funds for something else that may not lie in the district. I thought that was a good point that Tammy made in the memo. So I don't know, that's where I'd weigh in if I would make a motion, but I'm not.
I tend to agree, as a committee member, from that perspective. I think that when we have those funds that may be better used for these other projects that come up, if we can take advantage of the TID tool and utilize that in areas where it's available, that does really then save up those funds for other things. I guess, committee members, any additional thoughts? Sarah?
I guess I would make a motion to use TID funding to assist in the repairs. I guess the question I had would be, would we be choosing also option 1, option 2, the longer loan or the shorter loan? Is that also?
I think the reason we had selected in option 1, if it was a TID district, the 8-year was that coincide with the life of the district. And it also, if you look at the payments, because they currently are paying us rent or a lease payment, and they indicate to us that there really isn't room in the cash flow to pay the lease payment and to return the loan. So we said we would defer the rent during the loan period. And it basically, when you do the calculation on an 8-year term, it basically is the entire amount of the rent. So, I think that's how we kind of came up with the calculation, Tammy and I, when we were working on this.
It does make sense to be done by the time the district is done.
Yeah.
I mean, that's because you want to finish, a clean finish to that whole thing.
So I guess my motion is to use TID funding via option 1 to help assist Metro Plains in their repairs.
Okay. So we have a motion from Alder Watson to that effect. Is there a second? Second
I'll
from
second it,
Martins?
and I just want to make a statement.
Sure,
too.
go ahead.
So, it says here in the staff memo that we are leasing the building to Metro Plains, so after 20 years, the building reverts back to us.
Yes.
Is that correct? So doing these repairs to the building is actually to our benefit, to keeping, within the lifetime of this building, to keep it in proper shape. And also, taking the money out of the TID, I think also is beneficial too, because this is affordable housing, and we need to, as some people see it as a historic building and may not recognize that this is part of our affordable housing puzzle. So it's I think this is definitely taking the money out of the TID is money well spent.
Doug?
So who does the work fall on for contracting? Will they be contracting, or does the city have involvement in that?
I can answer that question. We've been working with Metro Plains. They have the contractors. They got bids on it already. That's how we came up with the dollar amount. So they're pretty much, once they have our approval to move forward, they're going to move forward.
All right.
And we would have to, for a point, because this is TIF, state law requires that we have a development agreement on this, so we would most likely, well, I shouldn't say most likely, one option would be to amend our existing developers agreement to incorporate this change, but we do have to have a developers agreement.
Okay. Go ahead, Sarah.
So then that means that, I don't see it on tonight's agenda, so that it probably would come back to us in June.
Probably through economic development, because that's usually where our development agreements
So
come
ED
through.
first and then council, and that's not going to delay their progress?
Hopefully not.
Okay, thanks.
That's the goal.
Okay, so with a motion and a second on the floor, then members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. Thanks, Tammy.
Thank you.
And so we've got, let's see, our next item is item 8, discussion and possible action on approving a second amendment to the planning option with Gorman and Company for 415 South First Avenue. And so we'll bring up Director Brodick to talk to us about this. You've got some information in the packet on it, but go ahead, Liz.
Yeah, so if you recall, back in 2021, the Economic Development Committee and I believe Council approved an award of the project at 415 South First Avenue, the West Side Battery, to Gorman as an affordable housing development, 50-ish units, and they submitted for their tax credits at the end of 2021. It was a very, very tight turnaround. They did not get those tax credits that year. We are very happy to say that they received them this year with their application. So that project is in process, but as part of that process, there is still additional scoring and funding criteria that they need to work through. Ted Mackham from Gorman is here to kind of further explain and flesh out all the details, because I could tell you those, but he knows them like the like front and back. Yeah, so I'll let him explain from here on out.
Welcome.
Ted Matcom, Wisconsin Market President, Gorman and Company. Yeah, so the reason we're here tonight is we have a quick turnaround in terms of a grant funding program that is through the Federal Home Loan Bank through Chicago. It's called AHP funding, Affordable Housing Program. It's actually $1 million of grant funding that can come in. One of the criterias that allows this property to be competitive in that grant funding, and it is a competitive grant funding program, is donated land. And so we have proposed, with the help of Liz, the Second Amendment. And that Second Amendment says that the land will be conveyed to us for $1, and in exchange, we will pay for the costs of demo for the building that's there, and for the city's costs to do that. So that's kind of what's the exchange on that. But it gives, I think it's a $90,000 purchase price, is that right? 100. So $100,000, but in exchange, we get $1 million for this grant program, and it is competitive, and we think we will be successful on that. So, and that's due June 6th, so it's kind of a timely thing because we got the credits just last week. So that's the purpose of the amendment. that
And it
we're
looks
here
like we
tonight.
then extend the option also through the end of this year to give you that extra time to get that
Correct.
turned around. It makes sense really that, I mean, the demo and the tipping fees are certainly not cheap. We know
Right.
that. So there is a return on that investment. Committee members, any questions for Liz or for Ted? Go ahead, Sarah.
So you did get the credits?
Yes.
Yeah, so the project is even closer to
Oh, yeah.
coming to pass. And so by changing this will help tick one of the boxes in that grant competitive process,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Every affordable housing project, as you guys probably know, has a gap. And this is one of those major components of the gap that comes from a third party, not the city, not the county. It just comes from, it's a great program from the Federal Home Loan Bank. And if you're competitive, you really try to just fit in that box. And we thought this was maybe a fair way to do that.
And just a question, so that's due on the 6th. Do you know when you'll hear back?
Yeah, it's like in November.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, and it's helpful also because we have devoted a sizable amount of ARPA funding to this, so being able to take flight this year will certainly help us with a timely spend down on that too. No, it will not? I thought we had ARPA on.
No, that was the.
Yeah,
Run.
we had, we actually, my development coordinator had the foresight before we, this is 2 years ago, apply for this ARPA money through the state.
Okay.
And the state actually gave us the 1.75 only specific to this site, and
Okay.
luckily we got it so we can use it.
Okay, so we did not have to then allocate additional ARPA to get that off the ground, okay. Because I know we did it for Landmark, but I wasn't sure where we left off with this
Yeah,
one, so.
This is different, right?
Okay, perfect. Doug?
So prior to this, the city was responsible for the demolition?
The city would have been responsible for
Okay.
demolition, correct?
And you, Liz, feel it's a,
The city will still demo it, but we'll pay the cost of the city for
Gotcha,
that.
okay.
So that's the difference.
all right.
That's helpful. With that, is there a motion to approve? Motion from Watson, is there a second? Second from Lukens. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, item number 9 is discussion and possible action on a resolution providing for the sale of $17,550,000 in note anticipation notes series 2023A. This is, we'd had a little bit of discussion, at least on an introductory level, about our PFAS solution and, how we get there before we get the grants and things that we've applied for. So I'll turn it over to Mary Ann to
Sure.
kind of run through that.
And Brian Romer, who gave the first presentation, is actually in the area at another community. He wasn't quite sure what time he was going to be here tonight. He thought he would be here around 6 o'clock, but he must be running a little late. I'm happy to address this issue, or if you wanted, we could go on to the other items and then circle back on this, because he might be here by then. You
Okay.
feel comfortable?
Well,
with
we've got
doing that?
20 minutes before council, so.
Yeah, and we've got two more items, I think.
Well,
or
and we
three.
do have, and closed session also, so.
Oh, yeah.
I guess let's just see how the committee feels. Are you comfortable running through it with Mary Ann? You've got some write-up from Ellers in the packet already, and we've talked at length about the PFAS solution and its costs, and about
Mary Ann
interim
Rowe.
financing, so.
Mary Ann Rowe.
Yeah.
Are you, I think we're good with you doing it. You've done this kind of thing a lot for us, so.
So, and the resolution was written by bond counsel, by Quarles and Brady. I had a chat with Rebecca regarding any, issues or concerns that I had, and she felt comfortable with this process, just to give a plug to Quarles and Brady. But if you recall, the $17.5 million is interim financing. The goal is to refinance this with grants that we get and with forgivable loans and loans through the Safe Drinking Water program. So the 17.5, we think will cover the lion's share of the costs. We do have the almost $8 million that we got from Senator Baldwin.
Yep.
And we will be going out for bid mid-June on this. So by the time this comes back, this is basically a preliminary resolution. You're authorizing us to conduct the process to secure proposals. It will come back on the June meeting for the sale, and that's when you would actually award the sale at that meeting.
Okay.
The thing that's different about this, I guess the other decision that was made is, you can get all of the funds at one time. Like we typically borrow money, we get all of our proceeds from the debt up front, we invest it, and then we draw on that as the expenses come in. Or you can tell the bond company or whoever, the bank that's going to issue this loan, that we could draw the money over time. Ellers felt that we would get a better rate if we took the proceeds all at one time, because it's more difficult for the bank to try to figure out the sale and how they're going to manage the cash flow, and we can invest it, and there probably isn't going to be any extra cost on our part by holding the proceeds from the beginning. The second thing is, typically we prepare an official statement, and, nationwide, we're looking for companies to propose on this borrowing. Because of its short-term nature and because of the type of project it is, Ellers has found that it works much better to hand select people, basically pre-qualify the banks and the bond companies that would be interested in this, and ask a select few to provide proposals. So we're still going to get competitive proposals. It's just not going to be a nationwide search. And so that is, I guess, the other item that would be authorized on our part.
Okay. Does anyone have questions on that for Mary Ann? Go ahead, Doug.
So if for some reason the project would get delayed till next year, we would repay this in June or at the end of, I'm not sure. What would we do? 24, we would hold this for at least a year?
Yeah, I'm not sure why would you think it would get delayed?
Well, I guess part of the bet on the come here is that we're going to get some forgivable loans.
Got it.
What if we don't?
Sure. So, yeah, I think.
Beyond the 1.3 or whatever we
Yeah, I do think that, when you're entering into this contract, because, we've got our pre-qualification of contractors that the Board of Public Works pre-qualified this morning. The bids will be opened mid-June. You're going to authorize the debt in June. We're going to get the proceeds, and the project is going to start. Now, if we don't get any other grants, this really is going to fall upon the ratepayers to pay the debt. But, I think that there is a lot of interest in supporting this project. Donahue, our engineering firm, has been working with the DOA and the DNR. We didn't ask them like what percentage. I don't know, Eric, if you
Well, we
have
were
an
also
idea.
very early into the application process for some of these sources, though, right?
I
mean,
know this morning we went on grants.gov to get information to.
Yeah, so, when we apply for these, right, so for state fiscal year '23, the DNR did come back to us and gave us some options for emerging contaminants as well as principal forgiveness. So that's on the table right now. We're waiting on the results of the state fiscal year '24. And so emerging contaminants and principal forgiveness and loans as well, so that we can make a determination on both fiscal years, if we can take them both, or which one is better for the city overall. So we're in that process right now. The application for state fiscal year 2024 is due June 30th, and our engineers, along with staff, are working with them on that to get that in on time. I believe it'll be August, September before we know the state fiscal year. And then at that point, the project hopefully will be started. We're planning on opening bids June 5th, working through the contracts and the bids and the information that we need to enter into those contracts, and then provide a notice to proceed for July. The idea is that we will start this project before we know all of the funding. It's similar to what you heard earlier tonight with the DNR and lead service lines and putting our best foot forward, knowing that those funds are there. We just don't know how much we're going to get at this point.
Well, but I think we were clear on the fact early on with the resin situation at the new plant that the only way we can remain PFAS-free or comply with a future EPA update is to complete this project, right? There's
Right.
not another solution. We're that far down the road. It's designed, it's ready to rock and roll, so.
Right, and I think that the policy that you made was for us to stay underneath the DHS recommendation. We know we're going to have to change that resin out at least once at a cost of about $1 million. And so the sooner we can get this project moving forward, hopefully less change outs for any additional cost to the utility. So,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have questions on this project? Brian from Ellers has arrived if anyone has questions about that, or if you're satisfied with Mary Ann's explanation. I will take a motion to approve the issuance of this note, anticipation note. Someone wants to make that motion? Motion by Martins, is there a second? Second by Lukens. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. Thank you. Item number 10 is discussion and possible action regarding capital projects carryovers and related budget modification.
Yep, this is the annual process that we go through where we have projects that are uncompleted and we're carrying it over to the next year. I've outlined the individual accounts. You can see that some of the projects have a revenue source, like the Metro Ride capital projects, they have grant income. The airport projects have grant income. The one that I wanted to point out is the Public Works facility. We had done a budget modification of 1.1 million to fund the facility design work, and that is basically unfunded at this point. When we borrowed our 2022 debt issue, at that point, there was no location for the facility, and we felt it was premature to add that to our 2022 borrowing. So this would then be added to the 2023 issue to recover those costs. So that is the only one where the revenue that we're outlining in this proposal is not available to us at this point. And then you have some that are in a couple of tax increment districts, and then it just outlines those funds that basically have designated funds that carry over year to year.
Okay. Does anyone have questions on those carryovers? And that just gets our money into the current year,
Yep.
so.
And then we are just finalizing our year-end work. Our auditors actually will be at our doorstep on Monday. So next meeting, I'll have a full financial presentation on all funds for the city, including the general fund.
Okay, perfect. Is there a motion to approve this item for the carryovers? It just moves, motion from Watson, is there a second? Second by Denny. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. Last item is discussion and possible action on accepted offer to purchase county materials property at 103, 105, 111 Winton Street, and that portion of 402 to 406 Winton Street lying west of the railroad tracks and related budget modification. We have Director Brodek here. This item is also posted for closed session if we need it for deliberation. So is there open session material to start with, and then I think we can decide if we need closed?
I think I know this committee has seen this item, I think this is the third time now. So I'm not sure that we really need open session material right now. We can go, if the committee chooses, of course, you can go straight into deliberation. I'm also just thinking about the time of the council, so.
Sure. So if you wish to have deliberate in closed session, someone can make the motion to go into closed session, and we'll take a roll call vote. If someone wants to read that motion? Or if we're to the stage where you want to act on what you see, we wouldn't have to do that. You can take action in open if you want. So
I guess,
unless you have questions for Liz that are appropriate for closed.
I mean, we have seen it 3 times.
We have. So if you guys are
Oh.
comfortable acting on it the way you see it, you wouldn't need closed session?
Well, does the rest of council have an opportunity to?
It's on
Also
for,
jump
isn't
on
it on
this.
for council for tonight, for closed
Correct.
session?
So, yeah.
Yeah, so the council can take advantage of closed session and discuss it in there?
Yeah, and if you would like to act in open session, I guess I would just like to go through some more information, kind of bullet points about this project, just to kind of wrap it up for everybody.
Okay.
So it's, I guess, is that what you would prefer right now?
It's up to you guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, and I wanted to give some background for the public as well, because I know that this has been mostly discussed in closed session. So some background on this is 406 Winton Street, which is also Mid-City Precision is the business that is actually going to be occupying this. Anyway, 401 Winton Street is buying 6 parcels of the land formerly known as county material land. They contacted the city offering to sell a portion of those parcels, basically because they don't need the riverfront real estate, and they would prefer to have the funds to reinvest in the business and be able to contribute to the trail extension. That reinvestment in their real estate would go to aesthetics and other building improvements, including some demolition those improvements and the improvement to aesthetics, we anticipate raising the assessed value of that building. This is the only location in the city of Wausau that works for Mid-City Precision to expand their business. They may otherwise move out to another municipality. We've had several conversations about that. This does retain 15 good-paying jobs in the city, and it allows for the expansion of 15 more. When I was talking with the owner, it's approximately $30 an hour that they pay for their employees, again, otherwise leaving to go to another area. And I just also note that this is a similar project to Wausau Chemical and Great Lakes Cheese, basically in that it is allowing the retention and expansion of a business and employees in the city, and we're getting riverfront land for it if we choose to go forward. We renegotiated the purchase price down from 1.225 to 1.2 million, in part because we, upon learning the details of the trail grading that was offered, we decided to decline that because we do have plans that can get that done within the next couple of years, potentially even 2024, depending on when we are able to move that railroad crossing. They are still actually actively talking with the railroad about moving the crossing that's currently located on that county materials land that would be located further north that would allow that trail expansion to up to Gilbert Park. I would also note in that negotiation down on the purchase price that the seller is not making any money on this. He bought the entirety of the property for $2.225, and we would be potentially getting it for $1.2. We've also done interactions like this similarly in the past. If you recall, in early 2022, the city purchased Dive Point, which was acquired for similar purposes to construct the street and right-of-way. And we acquired that for $300,000, so this is proportionally a better deal with higher return. We also had some misgivings potentially over the three-way redevelopment in the heart of downtown with the mall, because we didn't have a say in the project because we didn't own the land at that point. So in this interaction, if we do purchase the land, we of course retain control of potential development that goes on in the area, including trail placement and road placement. We also have, again, kind of going with similar practices and in the past, and currently, we built in MBX acquisition into the TID 8 plan amendment that was passed simultaneous to this one. And we have been acquiring riverfront properties, as actually I think many of you know on this committee and in council, we've been acquiring riverfront properties for decades. And I don't know, in talking with my current staff, we can't think of a time that the city has been offered a riverfront property that we did not purchase. It's prime real estate. It's one of a kind. So it's really an awesome opportunity. I would also note that the River Edge Master Plan was adopted in 1995, so it was 28 years ago, and we have not had an opportunity to purchase this land since. So this is a kind of rare opportunity that we have that we have to go forward with this. And while the land would be tax exempt because the city would own it, we anticipate development pretty fast on this. We already have a plan for the area that includes mixed use, commercial, and multifamily residential, especially in the southern parcels. Those southern parcels also allow for the expansion of River Drive, which of course enables that next development, next phase of riverfront development. And I should note that that is in our planning of this of development, we have two basically parcels of the River Life area that we've yet to develop. But then our next phase is we are planning on this Great Lakes Cheese south of Winton Street portion for RFPs, and we would anticipate being able to develop that in 2 to 3 years. So in 2 to 3 years, the tax collection would be exponentially more than it is now, especially because we would zone it either PUD or UMU versus the heavy industrial that it is currently. So the higher tax base would be coming. Again, the vision of mixed use and the River Drive expansion, it activates the river. And with that trail connection that we would be able to do with the acquisition, that actually would create a connection or a commuter route from Riverview to downtown and even south into Thomas Street area. So altogether, we would have approximately, we think about 3 miles of continuous trail on the east side of the river. It's also I mentioned the timeline that we would think that we would be developing this within 2 to 3 years. And I would also note that, I know contamination and remediation has been brought up. if we don't buy this, there is no way that that gets remediated. There's no incentive by the owner to actually do that work. We would be able to do that and clean it up if it doesn't happen, or if the owner retains the control. I know that there are no plans to do any kind of cleanup that way. I would also note that, again, there has been no hurry to get rid of this land by any previous owner. It's been 28 years, and we haven't had an opportunity to do this. And I would also note that we can't use eminent domain for trail development. We would need to pay what the owner asks. So this opportunity to purchase these parcels is really, as you already heard, with 28 years, kind of a once in a generation opportunity.
Sure. Okay. It's a lot. Okay.
It is a lot.
It is a lot. But we had been talking about this, and I know that when we had worked forward with a lot of our master planning for the trail and for riverfront development, we knew that land is a waning commodity for us. I mean, as we develop it, we have less of it left to work with. And, I know that in past, there has been interest on behalf of prior councils to have access to or ownership of that property. However, at the time when the parcel was actively industrial and functioning, there wasn't a whole lot of interest by the owners to sell. So, that said, the opportunity now has presented itself. It's taken a while, but it's here. So, committee members, do you have any questions for Liz on this parcel? Doug?
Yes, I guess the part that I like the most is that we have a potential through street to help that development down there on the River Life. However, I do have some technical and maybe procedural strategic concerns, and I can save those for the council meeting if we go into closed session.
About the street and road part?
No, about just the, in general.
Okay.
So I'm going to vote no for
Yeah,
this.
the
for this
council
purpose.
definitely can exercise its right to closed session and then hash that over
Okay.
in closed session if you want. Sarah?
I'd move to approve the sale.
We have a
Or
motion
purchase, I
from
mean.
Watson to approve. Is there a second? Second by Lukens. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed?
No.
We'll record one opposed, and that motion carries. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Move to
Motion
adjourn.
from Watson, second. Second from Martins. Members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, we'll stand adjourned, and we'll just take about 5 minutes to reset here, and then the council should be ready to begin. Thanks, everyone.